Hey everyone, it's Bricky, and I know not many of you on this channel are big Warhammer players or Warhammer fans. However, obviously I am is something that I am taking quite a bit of a part in a dice check over on YouTube and on Twitch, and I do lots of Warhammer discussing on my streams, and we just talk about it a lot. And normally I don't talk much about it on videos themselves, but now that I've taken Big Brick Plays and turned it into kind of the ability to just post whatever the hell I feel like, I want to talk a little bit about a recent change that occurred in the game. If you are not familiar, the game of 40k comes out in multiple different kinds of codexes and rule books, but sometimes, as is the case with many different kinds of physical media, there can be issues or problems with, say, balance or misprints or typos, that kind of crap. And basically what they do, GW that is they release an FAQ. This FAQ allows you to, it's basically a patch. It's basically a patch to a book. I mean, any of us who play physical card games can know how outlandish some shit can get. So it's nice to see when you can, even though it's still, physical codexes, you can still have some kind of patch, so to speak, later on. So with this new FAQ, a few things changed, how you play the game, some point changes to go along with it, and just simple things of that nature that I would kind of like to talk about, particularly about the armies that I care the most about, which are currently the Sisters of Battle, my favorite army, the Imperial Guard, Custodians, and Necrons. Those are the four armies that I generally own. I'm still painting up the Necrons, but I'll get there. I also have like Salamanders, but that's mainly just the different kinds of Marines I got from the Indominus box. So it's not really like, yeah, it's like 2,000 points, but is it an army? Not quite. Anyway, I want to talk about some of the rule changes first before I talk about any of the major point changes, but I probably won't make this video more than like 10 minutes long, so we'll see how it works out. Anyway, when it comes down to rule changes, they made an interesting rule that when both players do the roll-off for first turn, whoever wins the roll-off has to go first, as opposed to gets the choice to go first or second. I kind of hate this a lot. 90% of the time, people like to go first anyway, but there was those few periods of time, for instance, things like Harlequins, that really liked going second, and removing that entirely and leaving it up to chance, I think takes away one more decision of the game, which I think is a little bit annoying. Honestly, it feels very random, and it feels like there is no point besides giving people who want to go second no chance to do so, or no flexibility to do so. I suppose it gives them a 50-50 chance, sure, but basically it comes down to 90% of players won't feel this change because they were trying to get first anyway, but then the other 10% of players that maybe kind of wanted to go first are just kind of screwed by it and left a chance, which is really unfortunate. Honestly, we were talking about implementing a house rule in our games to where we revert it back to the original style, but we will see if it works out because it feels so unnecessary. Moving on, we have some more stuff. As we talked about first rule, the first rule and first turn advantage is a thing that's been in 40k for years. It's actually the best it's ever been right now. If you think that going first is really good right now, it has been better since ever. So it's actually pretty good comparatively. But at this current moment, they've actually made some changes to make second turn scoring go a lot better. Now, in order to rectify this, they have made it so that when you go second, before you would get your final bits of points at the command phase of the 5th turn, which is always kind of rough because the first person would be able to get their points and then they would have nothing else to look forward to, so they could spend their entire army in trying to stop you from getting more points. So when it went to your command phase, you were kind of shit out of luck. Now, it allows you to score it at the end, at least for your primaries, at the end of the 5th turn, at the end of the game, basically, which I absolutely adore and actually probably gives you even more flexibility as the second player than before. Actually, probably even more so than the first player, at least referring to the 5th battle round. Because now, so long as you aren't completely tabled or at least you still have a few units left, you could actually not care, similarly to how the first player doesn't need to care, and just go full balls to the wall and try to grab as many objectives as you possibly can and shoot them off theirs to really get yourself some good scoring. I think this synergizes extremely well with Raise the Banners High as well. Oh wait, no. It's only for primaries. Well, it still works out fine enough because you can place banners in the 5th round and you also get banner points at the end of the game too. So it adds like a little bit of both. Maybe it gives you both a reason to run out to get objectives and place banners on those objectives. So it's a little bit of a simultaneous, that's the word, type thing that you can work with, which I think is quite handy. I really like that change quite a bit. There were also a couple FAQs referring to things like disembarking units from vehicles and other stuff like that. It was mainly just clarification, like fight last abilities and stuff of that nature. As for secondaries, though, Bring It Down got nerfed, and as a guard player, I love this. Now, anything under 10 wounds only counts as 1 point. Anything with 10 wounds counts as 2. Or sorry, 10 to, I believe, 19 counts as 2, and then anything over that counts as 3. So your Knights and your Bane Blades still count as 3, but your regular old guard vehicles probably only count as 2, and things like Sentinels and stuff will only count as 1. As guard, I love this. I don't think it's going to make guard good, because they still have thinned their ranks, but it does, and you know, assassinate if you want to take that instead of Bring It Down, but it really does help them in a situation where they were hurting. So I'll take the little bit of an adjustment as it comes. Also, this is really big for me as a Sisters player, because now Penitent Engines and Mortifiers will only give 1 point, which means I can take max Mortifiers with all those heavy bolters and flails, and they could only get 12 points total if I don't take any other vehicles, which is pretty nutty, I'll be honest. That's really nutty. I think you're going to see a lot more of those soon, which is going to be scary because Sisters are already really good. They did catch some nerfs, though, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Besides that, Abhor the Witch is down so that things like Grey Knights as well as Thousand Sons aren't as affected by it. It also makes Demons stronger, which certainly did not need to get stronger at all, but, you know, it's fine. It's not a huge deal. I'm glad Grey Knights and Thousand Sons need some help. You'll probably still take Abhor the Witch, but overall, it's not really, like, it's not like as punishing. If you're able to really stomp your opponent as Grey Knights or Thousand Sons, it makes it so that they can't just max it out regardless. Also, While We Stand, We Fight is now on a unit basis instead of a model basis. I'm 50-50 on this. On one hand, I feel like just choosing your characters and hiding them the entire game was boring and stupid. On the other hand, it does make it so that taking certain blobs of units that can easily be killed in, say, like a glass cannon or glass, like, sword army can be kind of difficult. I'm kind of looking at things such as, I don't know, a big squad of Sisters being the most expensive unit, which is rather aggravating because then they, you know, the Sisters, they die pretty quickly, and you still want to get them in range to fire. I'm also thinking about other things like Space Marines and big squads there. However, they did state that if a squad breaks up into individual units, you do have to kill all of them, which feels quite strong for Space Marines because they can combat squad. I'm waiting for the 10-man squad of heavy Gravis armored intercessors being combat squadded into 2 separate units and leaving one on the backfield, basically turning, I mean, if you did it for 3 of them, into 6 separate While We Stand units, which is pretty disgusting. Particularly if you look at Custodians, a big squad of Alaris Terminators, like 8 of them, with Unleash the Lions, turning them into all individual units. So you have to kill 8 separate Custodian Terminators that all individually have OBSEC. Like, good fucking luck, man. Good luck. But besides that, the While We Stand, like, it doesn't change anything for Knights, sure. Necrons might actually make big blobs of warriors rather like the main thing, which rather might actually be kind of interesting, because then a big 20-mana blob warriors, you could actually build around that. If your opponent doesn't have a shit ton of chaff clearing, it'd make it so that things like Resurrection Orbs and Technomancers could be really useful. I might even see like a little use of someone like a Luminor Xerez to give them the hope of a toughness buff, but that is just a maybe. Or perhaps with the Canoptic Reanimator, that could make a difference, which we'll talk about in a moment. Overall, besides that turn roll-off, I only like it. While We Stand is a little weird, but I think that every addition and adjustment is quite impressive, and it really shows a surprising know-how to the game that I don't really expect from GW very much. So besides that turn roll-off, I really like this. This is a really welcome change. As for points, I'm mainly only going to talk about the 4 factions that I play, because this is the things I actually wrote down, because I needed to make them to change up some lists. But we'll start off with Sisters, my favorite army, because you know me, I love my Sisters. Sisters caught a few nerfs and 1 buff. I think it's all warranted, because Sisters are an S tier army. They're fucking amazing. And, I mean, they are quite hard, but that is completely fine. They can still be hard, but really, really strong. So I'm glad they're getting a nerf. It's good to see. Starting off, Retributers, those are your heavy weapon squads, the multi-melta carrying girls and heavy flamers and stuff. They got plus 2 points per model, going from 12 to 14 per model. War gear is unchanged. Totally fine. Multi-melta Retributors were arguably more powerful than Repentia, and Repentia are disgusting. So them with like Armar, Lady, Judith, Ruta, they were insanely powerful, especially with the Melta buff. So totally fine with that. I ran them in the tournament and I got pretty far with them, so it's unsurprising. Next up, Repentia themselves got a plus 1 point per model. Now they're 16 instead of 15. It's not the end of the world. I think it's still a welcome nerf. Repentia are just extremely killy for how cheap they are. And honestly, 16 points is really not that big of a deal. It'll only end up being 27 points more if you take a full thing of 27 of them. So it's really not that bad. Honestly, a full squad of 9, only 9 extra points, kind of coincides with the Rhino nerf, where the Rhino went up 2 points. So now I believe it's base 80. That's also fine. I think that kind of goes along with the Repentia nerf, because if you look at it, 9 points more for a squad of Repentia plus Rhino is 11 points, which is the exact same cost as a Battle Sister. So it makes sense, that kind of nerf. It's basically a way to nerf Repentia even more, but without making them go 2 points a model, which I would say might be a little bit much. But 1 point per model is perfectly fine, considering how squishy Repentia are. And then finally, Zephyrum, to my very happy surprise, got a buff. They actually went down 2 points a model. Their power swords are baked into them. They used to be 20 points, now they're 18. And I really like this. Zephyrum, I never thought were quite as good as Repentia. They had some great abilities, like being able to fly, innate deep strike, and of course, a really cheap reroll charges aura for only 5 points. But even so, you were less scared about rerolling charges because you had miracle dice. And they were just less powerful than Repentia because they had the same number of attacks, but they didn't hit as hard, and more importantly, they were only damage 1, even if they do reroll all failed wounds. I actually might start building some more Repentia. I was, not Repentia, sorry, Zephyrum, because I was planning on building Zephyrum to begin with, but as I was building them up, I kind of didn't end up painting them because I felt like they weren't really worth it. But now, I'm going to be really happy to field some Zephyrum. I will say that with the sisters, I would have liked a points drop on, say, the Dialogus. I feel like she doesn't see any play, and really putting her down to maybe 35 points from 40 would have been a pretty welcome change. Besides that, though, I mean, arguing for buffs and sisters is not something that I really should do. They are an extremely powerful army. I would have liked the Dialogus to simply see more play, because I think it's a pretty neat idea, but she's just outclassed pretty much every other model. She's like the only B tier model in the entire freaking codex, so that's a little unfortunate there. But besides that, yeah, I welcome nerfs and a nice buff as well. Honestly, I think it's all completely warranted and justified for the sisters, and I said that this would be a 10-minute long video, and I lied. I'm going to keep on going. So next up, I'm going to talk about Necrons, because there's only 2 real changes there, and I like the Necrons quite a bit. The Nightbringer went up 20 points. This means nothing. If you ran the Nightbringer, you are going to run the Nightbringer, and you're still going to run the Nightbringer. That's just 1 less immortal, or maybe like a warrior and a half. It really is not a big deal. The Nightbringer is insanely powerful. He outclasses the Deceiver and the Void Dragon, so much so that I kind of wish that the 2 of them got maybe a slight points nerf back to maybe 340 or 335 instead. Regardless, you're going to take the Nightbringer because he's god tier. If you were taking him before, you're going to take him now. This changes almost nothing. However, the Canoptic Reanimator dropped by 30 points from 110 to 80. This is a huge drop, and it only might make this unit see play. The Reanimator is way too squishy for what it for the power that it brings, and honestly, it's too bad because it's a damn cool model. But with it being only a 6 wound T5 model with a 3-up save, it truly is not that insanely like tough. But it is at the same time under a certain period of wounds, which means you can hide it out of line of sight. And doing so, if you think about it, at only 80 points, go ahead and try to stick it maybe behind some kind of ruin if you are able to be behind line of sight for some kind of warrior blob in front of you. And then when you roll reanimations on them, count your 4s, including your rerolls. If you get about 6 4s, then it's paid for itself. That's about 78 points of warriors, I do believe. So if you get 6 4s in your reanimation protocols with those warriors, then you've paid for yourself with that reanimator. It's not a terrible option. I will need to kind of think a little bit more about if I'm going to use it or not, because it does not require it to be on core units, which is quite nice. It just has to be on any unit. But at the same time, it is still quite fragile. And it will absolutely be targeted first in case you're in a situation where they want to be firing at the warriors themselves. So we'll see, but it is a welcome drop. I kind of wish that we had about a 10-point drop for the Hexmark Destroyer as well. We did not. It's too bad. I love that model, and it definitely needs a buff, but oh well, it is what it is. Next up, I want to cover Custodians. They only had a few changes, but they're pretty substantial. The only nerf they caught was the Alaris Custodians. Those are your big Terminator boys. They got a 5-point nerf, going to 75 points per model instead of 70. This is perfectly fine. Alaris Custodians were outclassing basically the entire rest of the army. They had more attacks. They had better gear, I'd argue, with the Castellanax. They had the grenade launcher. They had 4 wounds. They had Unleash the Lions. They also had arguably a kind of busted stratagem called Aramite and Adamantium, where you ignore -1 and -2 AP for the whole unit. And on Custodians, naturally, anything more than that will eventually hit their invul saves. So that's made them pretty disgustingly powerful. I think going up 5 points per model is totally fine, especially when you see what else changed. For instance, the Custodian Guard. The regular old Custodian Guard went down by 4 points, down to 45 points per model. So not only are you basically making up the nerf to your Custodians in their own right, the Alaris that is, but also now your regular Custodians, including those that can take Storm Shields and be just impossible to remove, are now way, way stronger. So that is a fantastic thing for those people who want to run more foot slogging Custodians. The Virtus Praetors, basically the flying bikes, they went down 10 points per model from 95 to 85. That is huge. 10 freaking points on bikes. I mean, the Terminators were outclassing the bikes, but I don't know about that anymore. Going from the damn Alaris Custodian Termies at 75 points to the bikes at 85 points, that is a insane points to like a value ratio to have Hurricane Bolters, insane movement, obsec, and rerolling all failed wounds on the charge. Not to mention the 3 CP stratagem for stooping dive, which is super clutch and I don't think people use enough. And finally, the Vexillus Praetor, the big banner guy that gives out the -1 to hit, because it's the only thing you ever freaking take, I guess is free now. So the Vexilla Magnifica that was 30 points is now completely free. I can't tell if that might be some kind of rules oversight, but if that's the case, that guy basically went down 30 freaking points to only 85 points for the regular, and I think 95 for the Terminator variant. Okay. Wow. So basically, if you take a battalion, right, and you took 3 squads of guard plus the flag, that ends up with a decrease of 66 points for a flag and 3 guard compared to before. Not to mention how many for bikes you might take. So at that point, if you had a giant fat squad of say 8 Terminators, then that's 40 points that they got nerfed by. So in reality, that's still like a 20-something points increase. It's insane to me that it's that big of a buff. I'm actually quite surprised. The Custodians weren't necessarily doing bad, but it was mainly because of their Forge World stuff. They're doing fine, but this might push them over the edge. They might become very good now. This could be me speculating a little bit much, but goddamn. So Imperial Guard got a lot of changes. Some of them are good, some of them are completely puzzling and weird. As for guard, like the infantry squad went up 5 points for a squad. So each guardsman is now 5.1 points. I don't know why. Infantry squads were not taking home games at all. And so that's strange. It appears veterans did the same issue. They also went up 1 point, so they're now 6.1 points. They were also not taking away games. I'm really kind of confused by that. I mean, I like my veterans, but Heavy Weapon Squad is now a minimum of 50 points now, with 5 points extra per las cannon or missile launcher. I guess that's fine. 50 points for 3 heavy bolters is really not the worst thing in the world, but they're heavy weapon squads. They're insanely easy to kill. So I'm not quite sure if it was necessarily the greatest decision. If it is even a nerf, I honestly can't tell, because it's really handled strangely. The command squad seems like it went up 1 point total. It seemed like they were about 6 points each And then after that, they are now, it's 25 points for a squad. So it seems that it is instead gone up 1 point from a squad of 4. It's what? Okay, so a couple other things. It appears that the Leman Russ, the standard Leman Russ, went down 5 points and the tank commander went up 5. This is fine. The Leman Russ needed a buff. This is not enough of a buff, I don't think. And the tank commander, I don't really think needed a nerf, but it was quite a strong unit, so I guess it is what it is. Overall, that's perfectly fine. It seems that the tank commander combined with the regular Leman Russ obviously had quite a disparity, and this makes it a little bit less of a disparity, but even so, it's not necessarily like enough to really not have people take 3 tank commanders like they always do. The Chimera is down 10 points. I like that. I like the Chimera a lot. It's a great transport, and having it cheaper is fine by me. The Astropath went up 10 points to 35. I think it's actually a pretty hefty nerf. I think it's still perfectly fine to take one because just having the ability to deny or something of that nature is quite handy, but it's definitely not a triple auto include. And the Primaris Psyker might actually have a little bit of a use now to be able to cast both Smite and something else. And finally, puzzlingly, Bulgrim got buffed. They are now 8 freaking points cheaper. 8 points, down to 35 points per model, even with weapon. That is insane to me. They still are the same cost as Blade Guard veterans, which are better than Bulgrim in pretty much every way possible, but that is insane. 8-point decrease to Bulgrim, which were already quite good, and no changes to Ogryn, Nork Deadog, Ogryn Bodyguard. Ogryn still are at 30 points, and they still suck. But Bulgrim get buffed? It's so confusing to me. And then I think they changed up the way the super heavies are, like the Baneblade variants, and I think they're even worse now. Honestly, at this point, I've kind of just given up a lot of hope for Guard. That's not true, actually. I still love my Guard, and I still will play my Guard. I like using Scions and Valkyries and stuff of that nature to go along with my average tanks and such, but it's just so weird to me that you would nerf infantry squads, buff Bulgrim. The Astropath nerf is understandable, and I guess I understand the Leman Russes to an extent, but then veterans? And I don't get it. I truly do not get it. I'm hoping that there'll be a codex sometime soon, but looking at the amount of changes they made here, my hopes are not very high. Man, 10-minute video, huh? Yeah, that was a fucking lie. Well, hey everyone. This is all I really want to talk about. There are a couple other changes going on, like massive Drukhari changes, and also the Tyranids. Bug Boys got themselves a nice little buff, but besides that, I just want to kind of lend my 2 cents on the matter, talk a little bit about what's going on with these factions that I play, and talk about some of the changes in the rules. I'm sure I'll be playing some more Warhammer very soon, and we get to try some of this stuff out. So, with that being said, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.